Chapter 14 in Digital Marketing Analytics book for BA 375 Online Marketing. In Chapter 14, we're going to talk about how we take all of this data that we've been collecting and turn it into a report. So when we're constructing reports, some of the recommendations are that we build reports from back to front, ensure that our hypothesis is good and is being answered, focus on the 5 W's, think about how we're reporting it, and think about what report frame we're looking at. So we're going to go through each one of these individually. So first, let's talk about building a report from front to back. So the recommendation is that you actually start with the end of the report first. What are your conclusions? And then build back in the report to describe how you got to those conclusions. Before you even start writing your report, you would have done your research, developed your hypothesis, make sure that your research matched your hypothesis, and then during your report, you are going to take the data that you have analyzed and make recommendations for the organization about the next steps. So these recommendations are the last thing that are reported. And then you build your report backwards. When we're writing a report, we should focus on the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why. What story are you trying to tell? And then make sure you include all of the components that are necessary to tell that story and to give that information. When you're formatting reports, you should, at the beginning, there should be an overview. What were the original goals of the project? This is an introduction. Why the project started, what were the goals of the project, what were you hoping to find, your hypothesis, so the questions, statements you were hoping to answer. Generally, a hypothesis is something you suspect that you're trying to prove with data. Methodology: how much data did you collect? How did you analyze it? Where did you get it from? And then your summary: what were the top findings from that research? What were the things that you found, including your most important data and findings? And then the 3 to 5 ideas for moving forward based on those findings. So it's not just about reporting on your information or your historical data, but what should you do with that data? What's next? That's actually one of the single most important parts of a report is the what's next. What should we do now based on the data analysis? And then you would also include information supporting any findings that you showed and why those recommendations are the ones that you came up with. What's the report time frame? Okay. How much data should you collect and how long? We've talked about this in previous chapters. The general rule of thumb is 12 months for both trend analysis and things. You might be able to do short term depending on the questions that you're trying to answer. The more data you have, though, means that the less outliers you will have in those data or the anomalies. And it's the more data you have is an accurate predictor of how behavior might have changed. So for example, if you just have a couple of months of data, you might not see any trends or changes like you would in 6 to 12 months data. And then making sure that the data is aligned for time as well as what it's trying to say. So don't collect a couple of months from one data if you're doing 12 months from another data source. You should be collecting the same time frame from all data sources. You should review the report at various components to make sure that it's even prepared for delivery. At a midpoint, There should be a time where you meet with the stakeholders and make sure that this report and the research and everything that you're looking for is going as they planned, that they're getting the questions they wanted answered. Take a time to sit down with your project and all stakeholders and show them where you're going through. Okay, then the final review. You should go over the final report and recommendations at that time. Next, a workshop, which is a working group to discuss the execution of the next steps. That is important for the people who are responsible for carrying out any next steps that might occur from this analysis. So, what are those recommendations and who needs to be involved in implementing those recommendations? And then you want to debrief with your research team or your project team. How did the project go? Did everything work? Did people contribute? And then what's the next project that we're going to work on? Now, this, of course, assumes that the company you're working for has a dedicated research team where it could be very likely that you're doing research alongside of regular daily work activities instead of being a dedicated research team. This chapter also talks about the use cases in reporting. And so the importance of this is that you we should recognize that not every single person in the organization needs the full report. That people in your information that are on the analyst side are going to want as much data as you're going to share with them. This is what they're looking for, this is how they build their jobs, etc. The other groups don't need as much information. In fact, they don't have time to read a full, lengthy report, and they might just want the highlights. I don't want to hear about your research process. I need to know that you did it and I need to trust that you did it, but I only just have time to hear the results. Okay? So the first is an executive level use case. They're interested in research and findings. Executives, high level management, they're all very interested in research and findings, but they don't have a lot of time. They certainly don't generally have time for presentations, and they might want very short reports. So you are going to just cover the highlights with executives. Um, you can share with project scope, but keep it extremely brief because this group is more interested in the results and not the full background of the product. Share the key data points and the key recommendations. These are the things that you need to share when you have people who just want the information as a result of the research and don't have a lot of time to read the entire report. I remember writing reports one time for a group and being told that anything over a page was never going to be looked at, and how you needed to condense everything you were trying to say in a report down to less than one page or just an executive level memo of the highlights. And the management level use case. So the management level underneath the executive level, these are the people that are going to be responsible for developing the tactics and strategies as a result of the research. The people responsible for implementing the changes that you might be doing at work. They want more information than the executive level, but you still should keep it shorter than the full report. So project highlights with a little bit more detail, not still keeping the project scope short, but expending a little bit more time on the highlights, recommendations, and next steps. Another recommendation is, what do you do with those reports? Many reports are presented and then they are stored on a shelf or saved on a computer. And this information isn't stored where it can be universally accessed by others in the organization. If you have a very large organization, it's even possible that someone else has, in the organization has already done a very similar research study. Building a central repository of information that all employees have access to, usually a web based application versus a command center for the purpose of resource allocation, but somewhere where all data and presentations and reports are stored so people have access to them. This helps with history, institutional memory, duplication of efforts. So you don't have a new team starting on a research project that another team just did a couple of months beforehand. So it's a very good idea to share information. And that is the end of chapter 14.